To server. The recording is in progress. Hey everybody, we're live and in stereo, and today we're gonna start off with organic chemistry, the chapter that you all have been waiting for. And Alhamdulillah, look at the class; it's almost half full today because so many students were eager to only learn organic chemistry and they did not give a crap about all the other chapters. I don't know what they think, what goes on there in their brains. They think that all the other chapters are not gonna come in their paper. That's their misconception. That's Delulu is the only Silulu type of thinking. But I'm just here to tell you that it is one of my specialities to teach organic chemistry. And just as I taught moles and I made sure that it was a piece of cake after all practice, we are going to do every single concept of organic chemistry, and I'm going to make sure that you guys are able to solve every single question if the examiner were to test in the Cambridge examination. And it is one of the easiest chapters, if not the easiest chapter in your entire chemistry. The only problem is teachers, although they are PhDs in chemistry and although they are masters in chemistry or undergrads in chemistry and macro engineering or micro engineering and nanotech and whatnot, there's a way of delivering stuff, right? So don't worry, you guys are in good hands. The only thing I'd recommend to each and every one of you is to please not skip classes. If God forbid, you skip a class by mistake, or you're not able to take a class, please take the recording before sitting in the next live class, because organic chemistry is connected. So every single lecture that I'll teach, every single topic that I'll teach is going to be connected. It's not like you can skip one class and then come on in the other class without viewing the recording. So no, it's gonna get hectic for you because you're not gonna understand anything, right? So without further ado, obviously we are a little short on time, so I won't go into the nitty gritties of stuff and go into a lot of just extra stuff. We're gonna stick to mainly what the course content requires, what the syllabus requires, and here and then I'll tell you fun facts in between. Okay, class timing is hopefully 1 hour only. Chalo ji. Without further ado, let's start with our beautiful organic chemistry. Everybody ready? Can I get a Gucci in the chat box, please? Gucci in the chat box. Gucci, Gucci, Gucci. Can we get a Gucci in the chat box? Yes, 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 yes. Let's go, everybody. Let's go. Valentino? No, not Valentino. Gucci, right? Let's go, let's go. Okay, so what do we mean by organic chemistry? From your elementary level or whenever you were taught about the word organic chemistry, even in your O levels in grade 8, grade 9, whatever grade you were taught about organic chemistry, the teachers always told you that, organic chemistry is the study of carbon containing compounds, right? Is the study of carbon containing compounds. And your teachers told you that, whenever you come across carbon containing compounds, it's categorized under the umbrella of organic chemistry. It's categorized under the umbrella of organic chemistry, right? All the families that you study in your organic chemistry, which we're going to talk about in a while, all of those families are categorized under the umbrella of organic chemistry because they all contain carbon, right? That was just the basic definition of organic chemistry. What you need to understand is that as a family, you don't study carbon dioxide in your organic chemistry. As a family, you don't study carbon monoxide in your organic chemistry. As a family, you don't study sodium hydrogen carbonate in your organic chemistry. We don't study them as a family in organic chemistry, right? We only study alkanes, we study alkenes, we study alcohols. These are different families which are in your course, right? We study carboxylic acids, we study esters, and so on and so forth in our organic chemistry. We only study these families in our organic chemistry. But your teachers who had taught you, your teachers had previously taught you that's the study of carbon containing compounds. And absolutely, when you talk about these families, all these families contain carbon. That is the reason why you study them under the umbrella of organic chemistry. But my question to all your teachers and even to you guys is, why don't you study carbon dioxide as a family? Why don't you study carbon monoxide? Why don't you study about sodium hydrogen carbonate, which is baking soda? Why don't you study about them? They also contain carbon. Well, what you need to understand is this is the incomplete definition of organic chemistry. It's not just the study of carbon containing compounds, it's the study of carbon containing compounds which have the ability or which have undergone catenation, right? So which has the ability to catenate, or which has undergone catenation. Sir, what is meant by catenation? It's not a part of your course. I'm just giving you an introduction to the chapter. Catenation is the ability, is just a fancy way of saying making rings, making rings, or making rings, the ability to make rings, and the ability to make chains, to make long chains or rings, to make long chains or rings. So catenation is just a fancy way of saying that a certain element can make long chain or rings. So when you talk about organic chemistry, it's not just the study of carbon containing compounds, it's the study of carbon containing compounds which have undergone catenation, or which have the ability to catenate. What do we mean by catenation? It's the ability of carbon to make long chains or rings, right? And on your organic chemistry, what you realize is there are no long chains or rings in carbon dioxide, in carbon monoxide, in sodium hydrogen carbonate. There are no long chains or rings which form in these particular molecules or compounds. But what you understand is the families that you study in organic chemistry, you study them because carbon has undergone catenation. Carbon has the ability to make long chain or rings, right? And what you need to understand is you don't study rings in your O levels and IGCSE, neither do you study this in AS. You study rings in A level second year, which you know as your benzene rings and whatnot. So in our course, we only need to look at long chains. So if I ask you, why do we study alkanes, alkenes, alcohols, carboxylic acids, esters? Why do we study them in our organic chemistry? Why do we study them? Because firstly, they all contain carbon. But it's not just that, because then you would have also studied this, you would have also studied this, you would have also studied this. It's not just carbon. It's not just because of carbon that you study them. What you need to understand is it's because of carbon, and it's because of the ability that carbon has undergone catenation, the ability of carbon to make long chains or rings. So because they, in all these families, carbon has the ability to make long chains, that is the reason carbon has the ability to make long chains. That is the reason why we study them in our beautiful, beautiful organic chemistry, right? So these are the families which we will study in our organic chemistry, because in all these families, carbon has undergone catenation, aka carbon has undergone an ability to make long chains or rings. अच्छा जी, let's talk about the first family, which is our beautiful, beautiful alkenes. अब इधर से आपका कोर्स शुरू हो गया. Sir, what are these alkanes? Before we look into what these alkanes are, I'd like to give you a few examples that you have come across these alkanes in your day-to-day life. If I ask you, sir, Abdullah, Aman, Amna, if anybody, Avinash, Ayan, have you ever come across alkanes in your day-to-day life? Mostly you guys will say no. Mostly you guys will say no because you are dumbos. You don't know. But I'll tell you, you have come across alkanes in your day-to-day life. If I talk about your natural gas, if I talk about your natural gas, what is natural gas? The cooking gas that comes into your homes, right? The cooking gas. I also have to write very beautifully because I'll share these notes. So the cooking gas that comes to your homes, the chula gas, the one that you use to make biryanis and mutton and pulao and whatnot, that cooking gas, aka natural gas, has an alkane called methane. That is actually an alkane. That's the main constituent of natural gas. The main constituent. Natural gas is mainly made up of this beautiful alkane called methane, and you use it to make your biryanis, to make your pulaus and whatnot, right? You need to understand that when you go outside and when we were in school, what we used to do is every time we had pack up, we used to go out and a chacha or an uncle would sell fries and samosas and pikoras, and he would have this beautiful cylinder which was helping him cook those pakoras and samosas. And what you need to understand is that cylinder gas is also your beautiful alkane. That cylinder gas is also your beautiful alkane, aka known as propane, formerly known as propane, right? The liquefied petroleum gas, LPG, liquefied petroleum gas, that's also an alkane. It's a mixture of two alkanes. The blow lamps. What are blow lamps? Have you ever come across blow lamps? Do you guys know what blow lamps are? पता है blow lamps क्या होता है? Blow lamp is a device which is used to produce hot flame. It is used to heat metal or remove old paint, right? So blow lamps may be, you have your alkanes which are being used. Spirit may, white spirit, आपकी जो व्हाइट स्पिरिट होते हैं, यहाँ कोई चीज मिट नहीं रही होती, सर स्पिरिट ले आओ, स्पिरिट ले आओ। स्पिरिट में भी एक एल्कीन इस्तेमाल होता है जिसका नाम है डीकेन। देयर आर सो मेनी यूजेस ऑफ एल्कीन्स, देयर आल्सो यूज्ड इन फ्यूल्स, देयर आल्सो यूज्ड इन वैक्सेस, in your candle wax. It's everywhere. All these alkanes are all around you. You just need to focus a little and see them. So from your cooking gas to the candle wax to, your cylinder gas that the uncle uses to make pakoras, samosas, biryanis, and all of that beautiful stuff, all of those are your alkanes. But the question is, sir, you've only taught us what or how these alkanes are used in our day-to-day life. You've only taught us, that this is an alkane, that's an alkane, this is an alkane. You've only given us examples of alkane. What exactly is an alkane? What exactly is an alkane? That should be your next question. Okay, sir, I've got it. From the candle wax to natural gas, methane being the main constituent of natural gas, which is an alkane, LPG, so on and so forth. All of these are alkanes. But alkane का मतलब क्या है, sir? What exactly do you mean by alkane? जनाब, alkanes are basically saturated hydrocarbons. Now the question should be, sir, what is meant by saturated hydrocarbons? What is meant by saturated hydrocarbons? It's a very simple concept. Saturated means that you'll only have carbon-carbon single bonds. Saturated means that you'll only have carbon-carbon single bonds. Sir, what does this mean that you'll only have carbon-carbon single bonds? This means that whenever your alkane makes a long chain, you'll realize that the reason why you study alkenes and alcohols, because I told you at the start of this class that they all have the ability to make long chains and rings. So what you need to understand is that when carbon bonds with another carbon atom, when carbon bonds with another carbon atom or with another carbon atom or with another carbon atom, they will only make a single bond between each other. That is what we mean by saturated. Saturated means carbon carbon single bonds only, sir. Only carbon carbon single bonds only. Then the question is, sir, what exactly do you mean by hydrocarbons? Sir, hydrocarbons are compounds in which you only have carbon and hydrogen atoms. So there's only carbon and hydrogen atoms, janabe wala. Only carbon and hydrogen atoms. So I'm going to add an only here, and I'm going to add an only right here, right? So what you need to understand is, if I talk about any alkane, God forbid, you need to understand that all the practical examples that I've given you, they all are alkenes because of two reasons. Because of two reasons combined. They all are saturated, which would mean that whenever carbons bond with each other, they're going to bond through a single bond between each other, right? And whenever you look at an alkane, there'll only be carbon and hydrogen atoms. There'll only be carbon and hydrogen atoms, right? So that's the two characteristics which makes an alkane as an alkane, right? So why is an alkane called an alkane? Because of two reasons. They are saturated hydrocarbons. The next question, what is meant by saturated? Sir, saturated compounds are those compounds in which carbons are going to be single bonded. Carbons are going to make single bonds only is the keyword, right? And if I talk about hydrocarbon, sir, hydrocarbons are those compounds in which you have carbon and hydrogen atoms only. And we'll talk about this in a while. This is actually going to help us draw the structures of all alkanes. But before we draw the structures of all alkanes, you guys must be wondering, sir, when you were talking about natural gas, you said that an alkene is the main constituent, which is called methane. When you were talking about, when we were talking about white spirits, you were saying that, decene is that alkene which is used in white spirit. When you were talking about cylinder gas, you were saying that's your propane. Sir, how do you know these names? How do you know one is methane, one is propane, one is decene? ये नाम आपको कैसे आते हैं? So first, let's learn the naming of alkanes. Sir, let's write the naming for alkanes. How do you name your beautiful alkanes? There's a very, very beautiful nomenclature. There's a very, very beautiful nomenclature. अच्छा, अभी के लिए प्लीज ये जो सवाल आपके आ रहे हैं इसको मैं इग्नोर कर रहा हूँ. जब मैं पूरा ये खत्म करूंगा, पूरा ये आज का क्लास खत्म होगा, फिर ले लूंगा मैं आपके सवाल, ठीक है? So first of all, let's learn how do we name these beautiful alkanes, because I don't want my flow to be disrupted. ठीक है? अच्छा, alkanes के नाम सर आपने methane का, decene का, ये का, वो का. How do you know? How do you know these names? Sir, we know it because of our beautiful nomenclature. Sir, what is meant by nomenclature? Nomenclature is just a fancy word that means it's just a fancy word, but in reality, nomenclature is just a set of rules. It's literally a set of rules to name organic compounds or to name compounds in general. अच्छा ये nomenclature decide कौन करता है? Who decides this nomenclature? Who decides this nomenclature? The nomenclature is decided by IUPAC, International Union of Physical and Applied Chemistry. That's the board which decides the names of compounds. You know, in your everyday life, there are new compounds being discovered or developed by these scientists, new compounds, right? So because there are these new compounds being discovered and developed by these scientists, they must be named. And how are they named? They are named through a set of rules. And that set of rules, that naming methodology or that set of rules is decided by International Union of Physical and Applied Chemistry, which is called IUPAC. That's the beautiful board. और इसको एक fancy term हम कह देते हैं nomenclature of this compound. What do you mean by nomenclature of a compound? Nomenclature means that the set of rules. What set of rules have you set? What set of rules are you talking about when you make the name of this compound? So our IUPAC gave us certain guidelines. IUPAC said there's a very easy nomenclature to name your organic to name your organic compounds. And we asked IUPAC, what are those nomenclature? What is that nomenclature? What is that set of rules? What is that set of rules which will help us determine the name of any organic compound? They said those set of rules are meth, eth, pro, bute, pent, hex, hept, oct, non, dec, and every student in your O level IGCSE class should know these. These are basically prefixes. ये जो meth, eth, pro, bute, pent, hex, heps मैं बात कर रहा हूँ, these are actually prefixes. You know, when you talk about a word being made, there must be a prefix in English and there must be a suffix to make a word. ठीक है, एक लफ्ज बनाने के लिए अंग्रेजी में you must have a prefix and you must have a suffix. For example, if I ask you guys, sir, how many sides does a hexagon have? How many sides? You studied mathematics. How many sides does a hexagon have? Everybody's saying six, six, six. How do you know that a hexagon has six sides? Do you know how? Because hex is the prefix for six and agon is the prefix for sides. So when you talk about a shape with six sides, you call it hexagon because hex literally is the prefix which stands for six and agon is the suffix, right? So any word is made up of a prefix and a suffix. For example, I say, hey, what is the shape? What is the shape? How many sides does the shape pentagon have? How many sides does pentagon have? Everybody's gonna say five. Everybody's gonna say five. So five sides, five sides, five sides. My question is, how do you know that it's five sides? Because our math teacher taught us in grade 4 and in grade 5 that pentagon has five sides. You know, oh, you dumbos, it has five sides because the name in itself is suggesting that it's five. Pent literally stands for five. Pent is a Greek prefix which stands for five, and agon literally means sides. So when you talk about pentagon, it is understood that you're talking about a shape with five sides. So these are these beautiful prefixes, and these prefixes right here are going to tell you the number of carbons. The number of carbons. So if I'm going to say, hey, I have a one carbon alkane, if I'm going to say I have a one carbon alkane, what should be the prefix that I'll use for it? What should be the prefix that I'll use for it? I'll use the prefix meth, because meth literally means what, right? If I say I have a two carbon alkane, if I say I have a two carbon alkane, what should the prefix be for it? The prefix that I'd use is going to be eth. If I say I have a three carbon alkane, what should the prefix be? What should the prefix be? The prefix should be pro. If I have a 4 carbon alkane, 5 carbon, please complete this. Write this on your notebooks and complete this, please. 7, 8, 9, 10. आपके कोर्स में 7 या 8 से ज़्यादा नहीं है, मैं 10 तक इसलिए पढ़ाता हूँ, just to be on the safe side. अच्छा, so if I'm saying here you have a 4 carbon, अच्छा इसको डो कर देते हैं ना, डो double dash. 4 carbon alkane, 5 carbon, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Right. So what is the prefixes? What are the prefixes that I'll use? So the prefixes are already identified by IUPAC. IUPAC is saying, sir, you're going to follow my prefix. Sir, meth, eth, prop. And for the 4 prefix, if I have 4 carbons and it's going to be an alkene, obviously, it's going to be having the prefix of bute. Is going to have a prefix of bute. ये but नहीं है, bute है. 5 carbons have a prefix of pent. 6 carbons has a prefix of hex. 7 carbons have a prefix of hept. 8 carbons, if I talk about octopus, right? 8 carbons have a prefix of oct. And if I talk about octopus, why is it called an octopus? कभी किसी ने सोचा है, कभी सोचा है क्या? सोचो सोचो सोचो. Why is it called an octopus? Because oct literally stands for 8, and octopus has 8 tentacles, 8 legs, जो भी है, right? So you need to understand that these are all the prefixes which are used to name different compounds or different substances or different things on face of planet Earth. 9 is basically non. कभी आपने सोचा है कि हम कहते हैं a decade has passed by since I last met my dear friend. Why is it called a decade? What does decade stand for? You say decade means 10 years. Why are you saying decade means 10 years? कोई आसमान से फरिश्ता उतरा था? नहीं. When English was being made, they said that dec is going to be the prefix used for 10. So that is why when you talk about 10, you say it's going to have a prefix of dec. But obviously, it must also have a suffix. It must also have a suffix. Just like I'm saying, hey, pentagon is a shape with 5 sides. Why? Because pent stands for 5. That's the prefix. But in order to complete this word, I need a suffix as well, which in this case is agon, which means side. Similar is the case here. When I talk about alkane, the way you go about its naming is that the alk bit is replaced by the number of carbons. That's replaced by the prefix. So if I want to talk about a 1 carbon alkane, I'm going to put a prefix meth. If I talk about a 2 carbon alkane, I'm going to put a prefix eth. If I talk about a 3 carbon alkane, I'm going to put a prefix, prop. If I talk about a 4 carbon alkane, I'm going to put a prefix but, right? And so on and so forth. But I also need a suffix. So scientist said, sir, the alk bit is going to be replaced by these beautiful prefixes depending on the number of carbons. And sir, because it is an alkane, the A and E is going to drop down. So it's going to be, if I'm talking about a 1 carbon alkane, it's going to be called methane. If I talk about a 2 carbon alkane, it's going to be called ethane. If I talk about a 3 carbon alkane, it's going to be called propane. And okay, complete it for me. 4 carbon alkane, butane. The A and E is dropping down. The A and E, sir, turned into a Kari Saab. Yes. Pentane, hexane, heptane, octane, nonane, decane. So these are all the beautiful, beautiful, beautiful alkenes that you need to know for your syllabus. अच्छा देखिए, एक नाम can tell you, one name can tell you 1,000 words, right? A picture can tell you 1,000 words. Just like a picture can tell you 1,000 words, the name of an alkane can also tell you two things. The name of an alkane can tell you two things, two beautiful things. The firstly, when you look at the name methane, it should automatically come in your brain that meth means 1 carbon. So it means that this is a compound with 1 carbon. It's telling you the number of carbon. The name is going to tell you two things. It's going to tell you the number of carbons. That's the beauty. It's going to tell you the number. And what else is going to tell you? What else will the name tell you? The name will tell you the family that it belongs to. So the A&E literally tells you that it belongs to the family of, this compound belongs to the family of, this compound belongs to the family of alkanes, sir. So it also tells you the family. Sidra end में आपके सवाल को देखते हैं. It also tells you about the beautiful family, sir. It also tells you about the family. So the name tells you two things. It tells you the number of carbons, that's what the prefix tells you, and the suffix in the name is going to tell you the family. So if I look at methane, I will automatically say that meth means 1 carbon, so it's a 1 carbon compound. And which family does it belong to? It belongs to the family of alkenes, so it's a 1 carbon alkane. That's a beauty. And what do we mean by alkanes? What are alkanes? Alkanes are saturated hydrocarbons. Alkenes are saturated hydrocarbons, allied saturated and allied hydrocarbons. Sir, what do we mean by saturated? Saturated means that there must be, their compounds with carbon-carbon single bonds and carbon-carbon single bonds only. There must be no double bond, no triple bond, whatnot. Carbon-carbon single bonds only. And when I say it's a hydrocarbon, that would mean that it's a compound with only carbon and hydrogen atoms. So with only carbon and hydrogen atoms, carbon and hydrogen atoms only. That's a must. Only. Please lay your eyes on this. अच्छा जी, आगे बढ़ते. How do we now draw these alkenes? We learned how to name them, but the next question is, sir, how do you draw them? How do you draw the structures of these beautiful alkenes? Sir, drawing is very, very simple. For drawing, I need to give you a prerequisite. A prerequisite from chapter number 3, just a little prerequisite. Although organic chemistry is not connected to your previous chemistry, but it's a separate segment, right? But for drawing, you need to just understand one bit. You need to understand that because you talk about carbons, you need to understand a little chemistry of carbon, right? So carbon, which group is carbon in? Which group is carbon in? Carbon is in group 4. right? So how many electrons does it have in its outermost shell? It has 4 electrons in its outermost shell. How many more electrons does it need to become stable? How many more electrons does it need to have a stable electronic configuration? Janabe wala, it needs 4 electrons to achieve a stable electronic configuration, right? To achieve a stable electronic configuration. And you know that the number of electrons that are needed, the number of electrons that are needed to achieve a stable electronic configuration are the number of bonds that the atom is going to make, right? So how many bonds will a carbon atom make? A carbon atom will make a maximum of 4 bonds. Always a carbon is going to make 4 bonds. Now if you know this prerequisite, let's look into the drawing of our beautiful alkanes, right? So let's just name our alkanes again. Let's just once again name our beautiful alkanes. And we're going to name the first 10 alkanes. हाँ जाहिर सी बात है 10 के बाद फिर 11 उन डेक है दो डेक है वो आपके कोर्सेज में नहीं है उन डेक क्या है दो डेक क्या है गोली मारे ना ओ लेवल्स में ना ए लेवल्स में गोली मारे ओके सो वन कार्बन alkene was known as one stands for meth you need to know your nomenclature whatever this nomenclature is your entire organic chemistry right अच्छा जी so one carbon means meth, 2 carbon means eth, 3 carbon means prop, 4 carbon means but, 5 means pent, 6 means hex, 7 means hept, 8 means oct, 9 means non, 10 means dec. And because they're all alkanes, they will have a suffix of ane. The ane is gonna drop down. 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 The ane is gonna drop down, and the ane is going to drop down. Avinash, I'll answer this at the end, please. Acha, आगे बढ़े. Now the question is, how do you make their structures? Let's talk about its structures. Let's talk about the structure. If I were to make ethane, sir, if I were to make ethane, first of all, can you guys tell me what two things does this name tell you? What two things does this name tell you? What does the prefix and the suffix tell you? Come on. The prefix is eth, right? So eth tells you what? Eth tells you what? That there must be 2 carbon atoms. So sir, can I say beautifully that ethane is going to have 2 carbon atoms like so? That ethane is going to have 2 carbon atoms like so? Absolutely. And obviously the name, which is ANE, this is ending with an ANE, it's going to tell you, sir, that it belongs to the family of alkane, sir. It belongs to the family of which family? The family of alkane. अब सवाल पैदा होता है सर alkanes क्या हैं? What are alkanes? Sir, alkanes comprise of two things. Alkanes क्या बोला होते हैं? They are saturated hydrocarbons. Done, sir. Alkenes are saturated hydrocarbons. Sir, what do we mean by saturated? Sir, saturated means carbon carbon single bond only. So carbon carbon single bond only, right? So if it would not be wrong to say that these 2 carbons are going to have how many bonds between these are going to have how many bonds between each other? Sir, saturated is an indication that it's going to have a single bond between each other. So from the definition, from the very definition of the alkane, I can literally say that carbon and carbon are going to have a single bond. Done. We're already done with 50% of this structure. Ab, dusri baat kya? We said that alkanes are hydrocarbons. What do we mean by hydrocarbons? Hydrocarbons are those, see, hydrocarbons. Hydro is coming out of hydrogen and carbon is obviously carbon. Hydrocarbons, hydrogen and carbon atoms only. So this compound is going to have H and C atoms only. Now you've already drawn C. You've already drawn your beautiful C, right? What else do you need to draw? You need to draw the H atom. So if I duplicate this here, I had this C and C already drawn and I had fulfilled the criteria. I had fulfilled the criteria of saturated, but I also need to fulfill the criteria of a hydrocarbon. Hydrocarbon means that it's going to have carbon and hydrogen atoms only. Now I've shown the carbon atoms, but I also need to show the hydrogen atoms. Sawal paida hota hai, sir, how many hydrogen atoms will each carbon bond to? Sir, you need to understand that carbon can make a maximum of 4 bonds. It has already made 1 bond. This left carbon has already made 1 bond. How many more bonds is it gonna make? Sir, it's gonna make your beautiful 3 more bonds. And which atom is it gonna bond to? It's gonna bond to your beautiful hydrogen atom, because you've already shown carbon here from the name S, right? So there are no more than 2 carbons, right? And you guys tell me the rightmost carbon has already made 1 bond. So how many more bonds is it gonna make? It's gonna make, sir, 3 more bonds, and that is the voila. That is the beautiful structure of your ethane. That's the beautiful structure of your ethane. Now let's draw the structures. You guys need to now draw the structures. आप साथ साथ करते जाएंगे तो बहुत बहुत जबरदस्त होता जाएगा. ठीक है जी. 4 5 3 4 5 6 7. Name them and draw the structures. 8 9 10. Acha, initially you guys might think that we are going too slow. Initially you guys might think that we are going too slow, but initially I'm building your concept. आगे हम बहुत दड़दड़ाम से जाएंगे. ये सिर्फ concept build कर रहा हूँ. तो आगे सारा repetitive. It's all the same. Sir, I don't get how we know how many hydrogen are going to be bonded to a carbon. Kiddo, Misha, you already know that carbon can make a total of 4 bonds only. It can't make more than 4 bonds. So if it has already made 1 bond, how many more bonds will this carbon make? It has made 1 bond already. So how many more bonds will it make? It can only make 3 more bonds. And all the 3 bonds are obviously going to be with hydrogen, because it also needs to have a stable electronic configuration, right? So this carbon has already made 1 bond. How many more bonds is it going to make? It makes a total of 4 bonds. It's made 1 bond. It's gonna make 3 more bonds right here. तो दो नहीं होंगे आमना, तीन तीन होंगे ना, क्योंकि एक बॉन्ड कार्बन ने बनाया तो 3 और बनाएगा, एक इसने बनाया 3 और बनाएगा, चार चार पूरे करेंगे. हर कार्बन, एवरी कार्बन इज गोना फुलफिल 4 bonds. गॉट इट, गॉट इट, गॉट इट. आमना समझ आ गई, सबको समझ आ गई. आगे बढ़े, अब बनाना शुरू कर दे. अब मेरी फर्स्ट नेम देम एंड देन ड्रॉ इट. 3 stands for prop. So 3 carbon alkane is gonna be propane. 4 is butane. 5 stands for pent. 6 stands for hex. 7 stands for hept. 8 stands for oct. 9 stands for non. 10 stands for dec. And because they're all alkenes, they'll all end with an ane, 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 with an ane. Right? They're all alkenes. Acha ji, now let's draw their structure. Sir, prop means how many carbons? Sir, prop means how many carbons? Come on, prop means how many carbons? Look at your nomenclature. ये अब आपको रटना चाहिए, nomenclature आप सबको आना चाहिए. Prop means 3 carbons, right? So if I talk about propane, how many carbons should I make, sir? Come on, come on, come on, come on. 1 2 3. I've already made 3 carbons. The next step, look at the suffix. Sir, suffix क्या है? ane. It ends with an ane. Ane means what? It's an alkane. Alkanes क्या होते हैं? पूछिए अपने आप से पूछिए. What are alkanes? What are alkanes? देखिए बहुत systematic तरीके से organic chemistry बनी हुई है. ऐसे नहीं है कि हवा में बस ये और वो है. Alkane क्या होते हैं? They are saturated hydrocarbon. Sir, what is meant by saturated? Saturated means carbon carbon single bonds. Khalas, complete, done. What is meant by hydrocarbon? Hydrocarbon means that this compound, the alkane, must only be made of carbons and hydrogens. Carbons आपने already बना दिए, और किस चीज की कमी है? Hydrogens की. आपको पता है every carbon can make a total of 4 bonds. The leftmost carbon has made 1 bond. Sir, so it will make 3 more bonds. और ये 3 bonds किस चीज के साथ होंगे? Obviously with hydrogens, to make it a hydrocarbon. Sir, the rightmost carbon has already made 1 bond. How many more bonds is it gonna make? It's gonna make 3 more bonds, sir. And the middle carbon, how many bonds has the middle carbon already made? The middle carbon has made uno dos. It has made 2 bonds already. How many more bonds will it make? Come on. Come on, guys. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Shabash, shabash, shabash. Khatam. Shabash, khalas. Two. Thank you. Everybody's right. So it's gonna make 2 more bonds, and that's with the hydrogen. That's the structure of propane. हम ही डरते हैं propane कैसे बनता है, ब्यूटेन कैसे बनाएं. शाबाश, सारे बनाएं. I'm giving you 2 minutes. बनाएं शाबाश, जल्दी. You just need to complete the bonds. कार्बन ने 2 बनाए, और कितने चाहिए? 2 और चाहिए. डस. कार्बन ने 1 बनाया. How many more is needed? 3. डस. कार्बन has made 1 bond. How many more bonds are needed? 3. डस. खत्म. 4 पूरे करने. डन. शाबा बनाए. ब्यूटेन, पेंटेन, हेक्सेन, हेप्टेन सारा बनाए. शाबा, I'm giving you 2 minutes. 8:43 तक का टाइम है सबके साथ. शाबाश. अच्छा, what does this short line represent? ये bonds है ना? Somebody asked, sir, what does this short line represent? This line right here. This line represents a covalent bond. ये आपने chemical bonding में पढ़ा है. This short line represents a sharing of a pair of electron, right? So this is a covalent bond. ये हमें covalent bond represent करें ना, bonds हैं. This short line is represent bonds. हरीम बाद में बताऊंगा ये क्या चीज है. बाद में बताऊंगा. एंड में बताता हूँ. चिल करें. स्ट्रक्चर्स बनाना शुरू करें. शाबाश. अब देखिए, some of you guys might have already studied organic chemistry. Most of you guys, almost all of you guys have already studied it, right? I am teaching it from ground zero. So whatever organic chemistry, I know you guys know a lot of things, but just hold your horses, huh? मुझे पता है अलीन, बिल्कुल हरीम आप सही कह रही हैं, बिल्कुल इसको यही कहते हैं, लेकिन थोड़ी देर के लिए आहिस्ता 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 आहिस्ता, शाबाश 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 शाबाश। मैं पहली दफा पढ़ रहा हूँ, बस इंशाल्लाह पहली दफा होगी और ये आखिरी दफा होगी, इसके बाद पढ़ना नहीं पड़ेगा। कमन कमन, ड्रॉइड शाबाश, बनाए यार, अनस बातें ना करें, बनाए शाबाश। अयान अनस बनाए 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 शाबाश, स्ट्रक्चर्स बनाए। मैं खोकर हाँ, स्ट्रक्चर्स बनाए, मैं खोकर हाँ, शाबाश। नूर इज सेइंग डन डन। ये ऑर्गेनिक केमिस्ट्री है लिटरली। इफ यू गाइस अंडरस्टैंड द फर्स्ट लेक्चर, इट्स अ पीस ऑफ केक। हाँ जी, डल तिल हेक्सेन, हेक्सेन नहीं पूरा बनाओ, डेकेन तक बनाओ, शाबाश 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 शाबाश। सर डू यू मेक मैथ? ओ नहीं नहीं नहीं, ओ नहीं, ओ नहीं, ओ नहीं, ओ चिल करो। सर कार्बन्स आर बॉन्डेड हॉरिजॉन्टली, राइट? वर्टिकल तो नहीं होता। जिस मर्जी बॉन्ड करो, नॉर्मली हॉरिजॉन्टली, वी डू इट हॉरिजॉन्टली बिकॉज इट्स इजी। आपको अगर ऐसे ऐसे ज्यादा बेहतर लगता है, ऐसे करने मर्जी है, हॉरिजॉन्टली करें बेहतर। वॉल्टर सुलेमान वाइट खान, नो नो नो। हैव यू सीन ब्रेकिंग बैड? यस। चलो जी, बनाए। अब देखिएगा पेन का जादू। लेट्स स्टार्ट, लेट्स स्टार्ट सर सुलेमान, लेट्स स्टार्ट, प्लीज यू स्टार्ट, डू इट डू इट डू इट, लेट्स डू इट। ब्यूट स्टैंड्स फॉर फोर, ब्यूट स्टैंड्स फॉर फोर कार्बन्स। उनो, dos, tres, cuatro. Yeah, four carbons. A literally means it's an alkane. Alkanes are saturated hydrocarbons. Saturated means carbon, carbon, single bonds only. Done, sir. Hydrocarbon means what? What in the word does hydrocarbon? Hydrocarbon means that it must be have carbon and hydrogen atoms only. You've already drawn carbon. All the other pure kare, bonds pure kare. All the other bonds are going to be with hydrogens. Hydrogen, hydrogen, hydrogen. I'm not writing H H H. You guys have to write H H H. Just for the sake of saving time, I'm just drawing these sticks. Yeah, but you need to understand the green sticks are obviously the bonds with hydrogen. I'm not writing H because I just can't be bothered, right? Pentane. Pen stands for five. Uno, dos, tres, quattro, cinco, morocho. They're all drawn. Yeah. A and E. It ends with an A and E. Direct indication of its being an alkane. Alkanes are saturated and they're hydrocarbons. All the other bonds that the carbon is going to make are going to be with hydrogens, right? See, you just have to complete the four bonds, right? It has already made one bond, three more bonds. Already made two bonds, two more bonds. Already made two bonds, two more bonds. Already made two bonds, two more bonds. Already made one bond, three more bonds. Done. आगे बढ़ी। हेक्सेन, हेक्स स्टैंड्स फॉर सिक्स कार्बन। उनो, दोस, tres, cuatro, cinco, mruchro, जो भी है। अच्छा, there it ends with an ane. Ane means saturated hydrocarbon. Saturated means carbon, 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 single bonds. Done, done. Only carbon, carbon, single bonds only, and all the other bonds are going to be with what? Hydrogen. Why? Because alkanes are saturated hydrocarbons. Hydrocarbon means what? Carbon and hydrogen atoms only. Hydrocarbon means carbon and hydrogen atoms only. Done. Heptane बनाए, meth, eth, pro, but, hex. Sorry, meth, eth, pro, but, pent, hex, hept. Done. Ane indicates that it's an alkane. Saturated हाइड्रोकार्बन। बताएं जी, क्या मुश्किल था? रट्टा मारे हम? नहीं। ये रट्टा था? नहीं, हलवा। सर आगे बढ़े। ऑक्ट, ऑक्ट stands for eight. Uno, dos, tres, four, five, six, seven, eight. I need to learn counting in Spanish. A&E indicates it's a saturated hydrocarbon. Saturated, it's an alkane. Alkanes are what? Saturated hydrocarbon. Saturated means carbon, carbon, single bonds only. And hydrocarbon means that all the bonds, all the atoms in this compound are going to be hydrogen and carbon only. Done. Nonane. Uno, dos, tres, cuatro, cinco, mucho. कितने हो गए? 6, 7, 8, 9. Done, sir. And it ends with an ane. They're saturated, and it's a saturated hydrocarbon. खत्म, खत्म सर। इसका फॉर्मूला भी होता है बेटा, सब कुछ होता है इसका। सर, दिमाग, पैर, पाँव, नाक, आंखें, सब कुछ होता है। अभी आपने सिर्फ थोड़ी बहुत स्केचिंग सीखी है। सब सांस सांस सांस। शांत हो जा, शांत हो जा रे बाबा, शांत हो जा। शांत शांत। डेकेन, डेक स्टैंड्स फॉर 10। उनो, दोस, tres, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine, 10. 10, 10, 10. And it ends with an ane, ends with an ane, which means it's an alkane. Alkanes are what? Saturated, saturated hydrocarbon. All these green bonds basically mean the bonds with hydrogen. Yeah, I just can't be bothered writing H H H. We're just going to waste time. Khatam. This type of representation, This type of, अच्छा वैसे मीथेन कोई बना सकता है, मीथेन, methane. Meth stands for one carbon. Meth stands for one carbon and it ends with an ane, which means it's going to be a saturated hydrocarbon. Saturated means that carbon carbon single bonds only. Is there another carbon? Is there another carbon? There is no other carbon. So saying carbon carbon single bonds only is absolutely correct. If there were another carbon, it would have been a single bond. If there were another carbon, it would have been a single bond, but then it would be an ethane molecule, not a methane molecule. So meth stands for one carbon, right? So if we say it's a carbon carbon single bond only, it will be a carbon carbon single bond only if there were another carbon, but there's only one carbon. So we talk about this carbon in its entirety, right? And if I'm saying it's a hydrocarbon, hydrocarbon would mean carbon and hydrogen atoms only. There's a carbon atom, and sir, you're gonna draw the rest of the hydrogen atoms, HO, 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 HO. And fun fact, this is your beautiful methane, obviously, and it's the smallest organic molecule on the face of planet Earth. Smallest organic molecule on planet Earth. There's not a smaller molecule than this, right? So how is it an alkane if it doesn't have a carbon carbon singular? No, it still is an alkane because it should be saturated, right? But there's only one carbon, right? And this one carbon in itself is considered as saturated. The reason for that is that agar hum assume kare that there is another carbon, this one carbon will make a single bond with it. That's why we categorize this in the family of alkane, considering the single carbon as being already saturated, right? तो ये एक एक्सेप्शन थी जो साइंटिस्ट ने इधर ही घुसा दी, क्योंकि आप जब और फैमिलीज पढ़ेंगे उनमें कुछ और ही बातें हैं, तो वो बातें कहीं पे भी नहीं कंप्लीट होती। मीथेन में सिर्फ ये एक बात कंप्लीट हो जाती है एल्केन्स की, इसलिए हम इसको एल्केन के अंदर ही कैटेगराइज कर देते हैं, घुसा देते हैं। डन सर। दिस टाइप ऑफ रिप्रेजेंटेशन सर इज कॉल्ड डिस्प्लेड फॉर्मूला। Sir, what is meant by displayed formula? Displayed formula is literally the type of formula in which we show all bonds. We show all bonds between what? What are we showing these bonds? These two are called what? This is a hydrogen atom. This is a carbon atom. So we show all bonds between all atoms. We show all the bonds between atoms. ऐसे लिख लेता हूँ. We show all the bonds between atoms. We show all the bonds between atoms, whether they are single bonds or whether they are double bonds. अभी तक हमने सिर्फ single bonds पढ़े, double bonds बाद में पढ़ लेंगे, हैं? बाद में पढ़ेंगे double bonds. So this type of representation is called the displayed formula. Why is it called the displayed formula? Because you display every single bond between every single atom. This is what I've literally done. I've shown you all the atoms and all the bonds between atoms. That's why I'm saying displayed formula is very hectic, because if I want you guys to draw 100 carbon alkane, it's gonna kill you to draw it. You're gonna draw, if I say draw the displayed formula of 100 carbon alkane, you'll first need to draw all the 100 carbons, because you need to display it. You need to show every single bond that every single atom is making. So you need to show all the carbons, all the hydrogens, and all the bonds between the two. So it's very hectic, right? Therefore, there are different ways of writing it. Abhi tak we've only covered the first type of formula, which is called the displayed formula, in which we show all the bonds between atoms, be it single bonds, double bonds. मेरे कुछ सवाल है sir. You now have a pop quiz, a chem check, जिसको मैं chem check कह दूंगा, हैं? You now have a chem check. ये रेस्ट की तरह ही है। आप लोगों से मैं सवाल पूछता हूं, आप लोगों से याद रखिएगा, please, for crying out loud, all the chemistry, all the organic chemistry that you've studied before this, flush it out of your brain. All the chemistry that you've studied before this, flush it out. खत्म organic chemistry जो है, chemistry नहीं organic chemistry, भूल जाएं, जो पढ़ा है भूल जाएं, जो मैं बस पढ़ा रहा हूँ, stick with that. Done? And if you have questions in what I am teaching, वो पूछते जाएं, ठीक है? तो आगे दौड़े मत, आगे अविनेश स्ट्रक्चरल फॉर्मूला बाद में पढ़ेंगे, फ्लश कर दे, ये वाला ना फ्लश करें, इससे पिछला फ्लश करें। अच्छा, chem check. My question, sir, is this an alkene? These sticks represent a bond with hydrogen. Is this an alkane? These sticks represent hydrogens. These sticks represent hydrogen. I'm just not writing hydrogen. You have to write it. These sticks absolutely it's an alkane. Why? Because it's fulfilling these two conditions. It's a saturated, and sir, it's a saturated hydrocarbon. It has hydrogen and carbon atoms only. And if I ask you the name of this alkane, sir, this alkane has Uno, dos, tres. This alkane has three carbons, and a three carbon alkane is gonna be called your beautiful propane. Done, sir. Next, chem check. Chem check. बताएं जी. Sir, I'm gonna write hydrogens as well, yeah? So you guys don't get confused. I, hi, 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 hi. Is this an alkane? हाँ जी. Is this an alkane? मैं ये नहीं पूछ रहा कि ये क्या है. मैंने आपको इससे पहले भी कहा कि जो केमिस्ट्री पढ़ी है भूल जाए. ऑर्गेनिक केमिस्ट्री भूल जाए. मैं सिर्फ ये पूछ रहा हूँ क्या ये एल्केन है. Sir, it is not an alkane because for it to be an alkane, yes, 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 yes. Thank you, thank you, thank you. For it to be an alkane, it must have been saturated. Saturated means what? Saturated means what? Saturated means carbon, carbon, single bonds. Only पे ठप्पा लगाएं पेपर में भी only नहीं मिस करना only. Sir, there is this कमीना double bond right here. Sorry for my loves, गलत हो गया. But there is this double bond right here. Sir सुलेमान, सर सुलेमान, आप सर सुलेमान का आपसे एक सवाल है. सर ये तो नहीं नहीं मैं लड़ूंगा. मैं कहूंगा ये एल्केन है. एल्केन में तो एल्केन्स आर हाइड्रोकार्बन्स एंड दिस इज आल्सो हाइड्रोकार्बन्स. कैन एनीबॉडी चैलेंज दिस? Can anybody challenge this? I am saying alkanes are hydrocarbons. This is a hydrocarbon. Is somebody challenging this? कि ये hydrocarbon नहीं है. कोई कह रहा है कि हाइड्रोकार्बन नहीं है. कोई बंदा ऐसे है क्लास में बैठा जो समझ रहा है कि एक हाइड्रोकार्बन नहीं है. कोई भी ऐसे नहीं. इट इज अ हाइड्रोकार्बन. ओ सर सुलेमान यू डम्बो. इट इज अ हाइड्रोकार्बन. इट हैज ओनली कार्बन एंड हाइड्रोजन एटम्स. ओनली. But sir, it is not fulfilling the condition of it being saturated. It is not saturated. Sir, so because it is not saturated, it's not an alkene. ये है क्या आगे जाके पढ़ेंगे. So sir, why is this not an alkene? Not because it's not a hydrocarbon. It is a hydrocarbon, but because it's not saturated. आगे बढ़े. Not saturated को हम कहते हैं unsaturated. Unsaturated. आगे जाके पढ़ेंगे ये क्या बकवास होती है. अच्छा जी. अच्छा मेरे को और सवाल है. उनो दोस फ्रेस. अच्छा मैं इसमें आपके ना दो तीन कॉन्सेप्ट्स क्लियर कर रहा हूँ क्योंकि बच्चों की कंफ्यूजन होती हैं कुछ. अच्छा जी. अम, अच्छा जी. कार्बन कार्बन सिंगल बॉन्ड्स राइट हियर. उन्नो पुन्नो 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 टुन्नो टुन्नो टुन्नो. इज दिस एन एल्केन? व्हाई इज दिस नॉट एन एल्केन? Why is this not an alkene? Come on, come on. हाँ बस सिंपल जवाब दें. ये जो इधर उधर की अनसाइंटिफिक एक्सप्लेनेशन है ना ये अपने पास रखें. मुझे या बताएं दो लफ्ज हैं वो मुझे बता दें. नो, यू आर राइट, आमना इज राइट, एवरीबडी इज राइट. बट सिंपल आसानी सी बात है. बिल्कुल बिल्कुल. बजाय ये कि आपके बिकॉज ऑफ दिस सिंपल सी बात है भाई. इट्स नॉट अ हाइड्रोकार्बन. इट हैज द ऑक्सीजन एटम. इट्स नॉट अ हाइड्रोकार्बन. एंड यही सवाल अविनेश ने गलत किया. अविनेश ने कहा सर इट इज नॉट अ सैचुरेटेड हाइड्रोकार्बन. एब्सोल्युटली रॉन्ग. This is what I want to fix for you guys. Sir, it is saturated. Saturated just means carbon carbon single bonds. It is saturated, but it is not an alkane because it is not a hydrocarbon. Alkanes are saturated hydrocarbon. Please keep this in mind. This is a saturated compound. It is absolutely saturated. Tick. But it is not a hydrocarbon. It is not a hydrocarbon. हाँ, further examiner पूछे क्यों? Because of the oxygen atom. Because of O atom, hydrocarbons are only carbon and hydrogen atoms only, right? Hydrocarbon means carbon and hydrogen atoms only. So it's not a hydrocarbon because of the O atom. So remember, it's not an alkane because it's not a hydrocarbon. ये नहीं है कि it's not a saturated. It is a saturated, but it's not hydrocarbon. Done? So दोनों conditions पूरी होनी चाहिए. अगला सवाल. Last question from my end. Sir, चलेंगे. चलो दिलदार चलो चांद के हैं पार चलो हम हैं तैयार चलो. बस ये आखिरी कॉन्सेप्ट है क्लियर करना है. आगे बढ़े. बताएं जी. इज दिस एन एल्केन और नो? हाँ जी. चलो जी मान लिया इट्स नॉट एन एल्केन. मान लिया. वजह बताएं क्यों. अब वजह बताएं. हाँ जी मान लिया कि एल्कीन नहीं है. वजह क्या है? क्यों नहीं है एल्कीन? भाई यही यही गलती पकड़नी थी. यही गलती पकड़नी थी. ईशल कह रही है ईशल की भी गलती है. ये भी गलती है. खदीजा सिर्फ ठीक कह रही है. बिल्कुल अनस गलत है. अब्दुल्ला जो है गलत है. अब्दुल्ला शायद गलत है शायद सही है. हाँ अब्दुल्ला भी गलत है. तैयबा तैयबा सही है. तैयबा इज़ राइट. अविनेश सिंह Avinash is also Avinash. Instead of saying because it has an O atom in it, say it's not a hydrocarbon. It's but better. It's saturated. Khadija is wrong. Salahuddin is wrong. This is what I wanted to figure out. This is the core concept that even teacher gets wrong. Sir, alkane की main definition क्या है? एल्केन की मेन डेफिनेशन क्या है? इट्स अ सैचुरेटेड हाइड्रोकार्बन. ठीक है, सैचुरेटेड हाइड्रोकार्बन. हाइड्रोकार्बन का क्या मतलब है? कार्बन एंड हाइड्रोजन एटम्स ओनली. सर इसमें ऑक्सीजन एटम है तो सर इट्स नॉट अ हाइड्रोकार्बन, देयरफॉर इट्स नॉट एन एल्केन. मेरा सवाल ये है, क्या ये सैचुरेटेड है कि नहीं? सैचुरेटेड की डेफिनेशन क्या थी बताएं जी. Whenever you instead of you just तुक्का मारना या just guessing on something, go to the core basics. Basic क्या है? What is saturated? बताएं जी. Saturated means कार्बन कार्बन सिंगल बॉन्ड्स ओनली. सर तो आपकी आंखों पे पट्टियां लगी हैं, यू डम्बोस. कार्बन कार्बन सिंगल बॉन्ड्स तो हैं. कार्बन कार्बन के बीच में अगर सिंगल बॉन्ड हो उसको सैचुरेटेड कहें. कार्बन किसी और चीज के साथ डबल बॉन्ड बनाए, ट्रिपल बॉन्ड बनाए, जो मर्जी बनाए, कार्बन कार्बन के बीच में सिंगल बॉन्ड है, सर इट इज अ सैचुरेटेड कंपाउंड. ये बस गलती पकड़नी थी आप लोगों की. सर दिस इज इनफैक्ट, ये आपको ए लेवल में, मतलब ओ लेवल में इतनी सख्त टेस्टिंग नहीं करता लेकिन शायद कर ले. सो ये मदद करेगा. सर इट इज सैचुरेटेड, इंडीड इट इज सैचुरेटेड, इनफैक्ट इट इज सैचुरेटेड. इसके साथ सैचुरेटेड मींस कार्बन कार्बन सिंगल बॉन्ड्स ओनली. एंड इट इज कार्बन कार्बन सिंगल बॉन्ड्स ओनली. आई डोंट केयर ऑक्सीजन के साथ क्या बॉन्ड बना है, कार्बन कार्बन के बीच में तो सिंगल है. सो इट इज सैचुरेटेड प्लीज. सो द रीजन व्हाई इट्स नॉट an alkane is just for the sole reason कि it's not a hydrocarbon. And why is it not a hydrocarbon? Because it also has the O atom. बस ये गलती पकड़. देखिए हमेशा कोर बेसिक्स में जाया करें. डन. एनी क्वेश्चंस अप अंटिल दिस पॉइंट? पूछे. कोई सवाल, कोई शक, कोई शुबा? कल एल्केन्स मुक जाएंगे. एल्केन्स अब सारे ठक 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 करके मुकेंगे. कल एल्केन्स मुक जाएंगे, परसों एल्कीन्स मुक जाएंगे, कल नहीं बल्कि परसों एल्केन्स मुक जाएंगे. फिर एक एक दिन में एक एक चैप, एक एक फैमिली, 10 8 दिनों में पूरा कोर्स खत्म. एनी क्वेश्चंस व्हाटसोएवर अप अंटिल दिस पॉइंट? Sir, is methane saturated because there is no extra carbon? Yes, it's just one carbon. One carbon alone is always saturated. One carbon alone is always saturated because what you realize is अगर कोई और कार्बन होता तो वो सिंगल बॉन्ड ही होता, लेकिन नहीं है तो हम एक कार्बन को ही सैचुरेटेड कंसिडर करते हैं. Sir, how much more time? The time is khatam. I'm just going to give you guys a quick summary. A quick summary is that a quick summary about alkanes is that we studied that what in the world is an alkane. We studied about alkanes. What in the world is an alkane? Alkanes are quick summary. Quick summary. हर chapter के end में quick, हर class के end में quick summary. Alkanes are saturated hydrocarbons. Sir, we learned that saturated means carbon carbon single bonds only. Single bonds only. Done, sir. And hydrocarbon means carbon and hydrogen atoms, compounds with carbon and hydrogen atoms only. Hai? And then you realized, you realized that this actually helped you in drawing the structures of alkanes. Sir, how did we name alkanes? We learned the naming of alkanes. Sir, we learned the naming of alkanes. We had a nomenclature, all these prefixes, और हमारे पास sir basically a molecule with an O is a saturated organic. Oh, मुझे गोली मार दे. गोली मार दे, गोली भाई. सैचुरेटेड कार्बन कार्बन सिंगल बॉन्ड को कहते ओ किधर से आ गया? कार्बन और कार्बन के देखो. सर बेसिकली मॉलिक्यूल विद एन ओ इज अ सैचुरेटेड ऑर्गेनिक कंपाउंड. गोली मार दे बेटा मुझे. जुलेखा मरती की औरत. अच्छा बेटा नहीं ना. No, no, no. It's not about the O. It's about these bonds. If the carbon carbon bonds are single, it's gonna be saturated no matter और क्या मौजूद हो. एल्केन की होने के लिए सैचुरेटेड हाइड्रोकार्बन होना चाहिए, सैचुरेटेड भी होना चाहिए और सिर्फ कार्बन और हाइड्रोजन भी होने चाहिए. ओ की वजह से वो हाइड्रोकार्बन नहीं था. इसका मतलब ये तो नहीं कि ओ की वजह से अनसैचुरेटेड नहीं, सैचुरेटेड सिर्फ कार्बन को देखे हैं. मेक सेंस नाउ? अच्छा जी, हाउ डिड वी नेम एल्केन्स? वी टुक आर प्रीफिक्सेस which were meth, eth, pro, but, and whatnot, and the alk bit was replaced by the prefix which represented the number of carbons, and the ane dropped down to tell the entire world that this compound belongs to the family of alkanes. So the ane dropped down and taught us the family. And then we learned how to draw the displayed formula. What is meant by displayed formula? Displayed formula is a formula in which you show, in displayed formula we show all the bonds between all atoms. We show bonds between all atoms, all the bonds between all atoms, be it single bond, double bond, whatever bonds, right? Between all atoms लिख लें जो मर्जी, डन. और ये हमने structures बनाए based on the names. When we talked about pentane, for example, we said that pentane is an alkane, so pent would mean 5 carbons, and then we looked at the definition of an alkane, which was saturated hydrocarbon. और बताएं क्या था? If today's class is clear, mark my word, this was the most difficult class of organic chemistry. ये मेरे से लिख के ले. This was the most difficult class of organic chemistry, and if you understood today's class, आगे हलवाई हलवाई, ये मेरा लिखा लिखा ले लें अपने साथ, ये लिख लें अपने साथ, ठीक है? अभी कोई सवाल है तो, कोई शक है, कोई शुबह है, बंदा पूछे, भाई घबराएं मत. जो मैं, आई एम नॉट जोकिंग, आई एम टेलिंग यू द ट्रूथ, आई स्वेयर. इसके आगे आसानी पैदा होनी है, देख लेना. इसके आगे कसम से आसानी पैदा होनी है. एनी